In this country England, writers write to entertain, they raise questions of individual existence, but for a Nigerian writer in my position you can't go into that. Literature has to be combative. You cannot have art for art's sake. This art must do something to transform the lives of a community, of a nation. And for that reason, literature has a different purpose altogether in that sort of society. The stories that I tell must have a different sort of purpose from the artist in the Western world, and art, in that instance, becomes so meaningful both to the artist and to the consumers of that art, because you do not just depend on them to read your books, you even have to live a life that they can emulate. I've often envied those writers in the Western world who can peacefully practice their craft and earn a living thereby. What the authorities here cannot stand is that a writer should give voice to the voiceless or organize them for action. In short, they do not want literature on the streets. Saro-Wiwa describes the fortunes of a young naive recruit in the Nigerian Civil War, from the first proud days of recruitment to the disillusionment, confusion, and horror that follows. The author's use of rotten English, a mixture of Nigerian pidgin English, broken English and idiomatic English, makes this a unique and powerful novel. It is not the leaking roof, nor the singing mosquitoes in the damp, wretched cell. It is not the clank of the key as the warden locks you in. It is not the measly rations, nor yet the emptiness of day dipping into the blankness of night. It is the lies that have been drummed into your ears for a generation. It is the security agent running amok, executing callous calamitous orders in exchange for a wretched meal a day. The magistrate writing into her book cowardice masking as obedience, lurking in our denigrated souls. It is fear damping trousers. Dear friend, turns our free world. Born Kanul Saro-Wiwa, Saro-Wiwa was the son of Chief Jim Wiwa, a forest ranger that held a title in the Nigerian chieftaincy system, and his third wife Widu. He officially changed his name to Saro-Wiwa after the Nigerian Civil War. 5. He was married to Maria Saro-Wiwa. 6. His father's hometown was the village of Bain, Ogoniland, whose residents speak the Kina dialect of the Ogoni language. Saro-Wiwa spent his childhood in an Anglican home and eventually proved himself to be an excellent student. He received primary education at a native authority school in Bori 7, then attended secondary school at Government College Umuahia. A distinguished student, Saro-Wiwa was captain of the table tennis team and amassed school prizes in history and English. 8. On completion of secondary education, he obtained a scholarship to study English at the University of Ibadan. At Ibadan, he plunged into academic and cultural interests. He won departmental prizes in 1963 and 1965 and worked for a drama troupe. 9. The traveling drama troupe performed in Kano, Benin, Ilorin, and Lagos and collaborated with the Nottingham Playhouse Theatre Group that included a young Judi Dench. 9. He briefly became a teaching assistant at the University of Lagos and later at University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Saro-Wiwa was an African literature lecturer in Nsukka when the Civil War broke out. He supported the federal government and had to leave the region for his hometown of Bori. On his journey to Port Harcourt, he witnessed the multitudes of refugees returning to the east, a scene he described as a sorry sight to see. 10. 3 days after his arrival, nearby Bani fell to federal troops. He and his family then stayed in Bani. He traveled back to Lagos and took a position at the University of Lagos, which did not last long as he was called back to Bani. He was called back to become the civilian administrator for the port city of Bani in the Niger Delta, and during the Nigerian Civil War positioned himself as an Ogoni leader dedicated to the federal cause. 11. He followed his job as an administrator with an appointment as a commissioner in the Old Rivers State. His best-known novel, Saro-Wiwa, a novel in rotten English, 1985, tells the story of a naive village boy recruited to the army during the Nigerian Civil War of 1967 to 1970, and intimates the political corruption and patronage in Nigeria's military regime of the time. Saro-Wiwa's War Diaries, On a Darkling Plain, 1989, document his experience during the war. He was also a successful businessman and television producer. His satirical television series, Basie and Company, was wildly popular, with an estimated audience of 30 million. In the early 1970s, Saro-Wiwa served as the Regional Commissioner for Education in the Rivers State Cabinet, but was dismissed in 1973 because of his support for Oganai autonomy. In the late 1970s, he established a number of successful business ventures in retail and real estate, and during the 1980s concentrated primarily on his writing, journalism, and television production. In 1977, he became involved in the political arena, running as the candidate to represent Oganai in the Constituent Assembly. Saro-Wiwa lost the election in a narrow margin 13. It was during this time he had a fallout with his friend Edwards Kobani. His intellectual work was interrupted in 1987 when he re-entered the political scene, having been appointed by the newly installed dictator Ibrahim Babangida to aid the country's transition to democracy. But Saro-Wiwa soon resigned because he felt Babangida's supposed plans for a return to democracy were disingenuous. Saro-Wiwa's sentiments were proven correct in the coming years, as Babangida failed to relinquish power. In 1993, Babangida annulled Nigeria's general elections that would have transferred power to a civilian government, sparking mass civil unrest and eventually forcing him to step down, at least officially, that same year. 14.